Okay, there she is. A real city. The future.
I would not want to live in a world like this. This looks like Skibbity Toilet.
Everything is starting to cater towards grabbing the viewer's attention as fast as possible. You go on Netflix, they're showing you exactly what you'll want to watch. You go to Instagram, the first post will definitely be something that pisses you off, and food from any location can just be dropped at your door for way too much money, let's be real.
You know, forget about it.
Yet for some reason, in this new era of satisfaction eternally guaranteed, massive video games seem to be heading the complete opposite direction in terms of how they captivate their audience. It's not like slow-paced gaming is exclusively a modern luxury. Slow video games have existed for a very long time, but because of technological limitations, it was hard to make a game slow without it feeling sluggish. Take RuneScape, for example. Most of RuneScape is clicking something and watching your character do it, because that's how you progress with the rest of the player base. But notice how a lot of RuneScape isn't actually playing RuneScape, because the simple 2000s movement just wasn't deep enough to be engaging on its own to keep the player wanting to perform said repetitive action. But back in the day, even games that were considered slow-paced were still designed in a way that constantly had the player stimulated.
I hate these things!
The discs used for PlayStation 1 games could hold a maximum of 660 megabytes, and considering a handful of successful games today are around that size, it was pretty impressive. However, like I said before, even games that were slow by design couldn't embrace true turtle pacing, because the developers could only do so much with each area. So using Metal Gear Solid as an example, the areas are all heavily guarded spaces with a multitude of places to hide, run through, and avoid. Konami simply didn't have the space to create open areas that provided realistic levels of tension. And here's a fun fact for you, early on in development, Snake's movement took up so much of the PS1 storage space, they couldn't flesh out anything else. So they had to compress their original idea majorly, which resulted in features like Snake having a designated pose for each weapon cut from the final game. For a stealth game, Metal Gear Solid is very fast. The player is always scooting under an object, up a ladder, through a bad guy. You are not slick. And other than the many obstacles, there's also a plethora of items scattered around the map, including ones that are hidden behind breakable walls. Even Metal Gear Solid 5, which has many more ways to quickly move Snake around, plays much slower than the original Metal Gear Solid. To ensure fluidity in Metal Gear Solid's fast gameplay, Kojima and his team worked hard to implement in-engine cutscenes despite the immense pressure to make the cutscenes CG like the reveal trailer. Arguably, the slowest parts of gameplay in Metal Gear Solid is when the player needs to crawl through vents to enter or exit locked parts of the map. But other than that, despite its genre, Metal Gear Solid is a relatively fast-paced game because if it was any slower, it would simply feel sluggish. Here's an example of an older video game that tried being slow but ended up being slugged as hell. Silent Hill 3 is a scary game when there's no slurpers. These slurping assholes knock you down every single time they attack, and there's so goddamn many. Horror is scary because you don't expect what's going to happen, but creepy monsters doing the same thing to minorly inconvenience you over and over is not horror. That is trolling. Fighting the enemies with melee weapons takes way too long, and the combat doesn't go any deeper than spam X at target. So there's never any incentive to actually engage in combat since it's completely mindless. Great game, but holy crap, as a horror title, it definitely should have had more unique enemy encounters to actually make each new room special and not just a filler segment until the next puzzle or cutscene, which is where Silent Hill 3 excels. Finally, some uninterrupted exploration. Since Metal Gear Solid, video games have evolved and are able to accomplish a lot more in their presentation. And slow-paced design has started to crawl out of the million-hour JRPG tutorial hole that it used to be in. Because you know what radiates confidence? What radiates the energy of a good video game? A AAA game that's not afraid to take its time. As much as I enjoyed Star Wars Outlaws, the game shows you everything worth showing in the first 3 hours of gameplay, which, to be fair, is pretty common among every Ubisoft open world game. Even though the game is fun, it's really not that deep and is instead a handful of surface level mechanics bunched together to create an open world video game. Meanwhile, here's Grand Theft Auto 3. In Grand Theft Auto 3, we're killing people, we're getting money. Yet the actual action of GTA 3 doesn't start until a couple missions in, because from the get-go, Rockstar knew they implemented engaging mechanics that the 2001 gamer would be fine playing with even if they were isolated beforehand for a short time. Like how most of the introductory missions are strictly driving related because, oh my days, 3D Universe GTA driving is so responsive, and once you get the sharp controls down, it's extremely rewarding being able to be an unstoppable, almost expired G2 driver. Okay, let's talk about LA Noire. LA Noire is a game from 2011 where you play as a detective in 1940 1940s Los Angeles. With box art like this, you'd imagine most of the game would be car chases, gunfights, chasing down bad guys. Holy shit, that's like the 15th naked woman in a row. But so much of the game is just interacting with people and picking up stuff and then putting it down. LA Noire was built with the idea that it was going to be a slow game. The facial capture technology that Team Bundy used was called motion scan, and the tech for motion scan was created by a sister company for Team Bundy called Depth Analysis. Usually in motion capture, actors will wear tight outfits with big white balls attached so that the cameras can pick up the person's movements and translate it onto a 3D model. Motion scan is different from the traditional methods of motion capture because it scans the actor's face, which allows for pinpoint accuracy in facial expressions. The downside to motion scan is 1, they only used it in LA Noire because Team Bundy shut down. 2, the actors have to be completely still while saying their lines, otherwise it'll mess up the animation. The reason I'm talking about this is because LA Noire turned talking to NPCs into a fun game mechanic instead of relying on endless waves of enemies shooting at the player to heighten the game's enjoyment. There are also a few sections in LA Noire where the player needs to read through ledgers to find names and addresses of possible suspects, and the only ways that the player will know which one to choose is by remembering a familiar name or place an NPC had previously said. One traditionally boring turned awesome game mechanic leading to another traditionally boring turned awesome game mechanic, ultimately circling around to a damn fine slow-paced video game. And it's not that LA Noire doesn't have combat. There's a handful of gunfights in the game, but story-wise, they don't pop up nearly as much as many other Rockstar titles. The game constantly reminds you that you're a police officer working to help the people and not a cold-blooded gunslinging badass. But I will say, Cole Phelps is kind of a dick, man.
We're after for it. If your story doesn't check out, Jessup, we're hanging you.
No, I have no idea. She was a good girl, but she didn't confide in me.
A nosy old hag like you.
One of my favorite moments during the traffic investigations was when one of the suspects had left a letter behind detailing her relationship with her parents. While questioning her, I noticed that she flaked out on the details when talking about her mother, and I only knew that because I took the time to read the note, which of course led to her telling me what actually happened after I successfully called her out on her lie. The game didn't tell me to read the letter. There weren't any markers or highlights cluing me into where I was supposed to read. It was only put there as a clue and gave me the decision whether I wanted to care about it or not. This is game design. Test the player's problem-solving ability and challenge them using intelligence and not just video gamey setups. Because LA Noire insists on telling stories through characters and actions and isn't scared to take its time setting the stage, when a combat segment or trailing moment pops up, it's exciting and also feels natural because there was so much meat beforehand to balance out what would be a predictable formula. Despite being a work of art in every single way, a lot of people consider LA Noire boring because of its pacing, which unfortunately is the reputation that a lot of slow-paced games get. It's boring, it's sluggish, it's a walking simulator. To put this very stupid criticism to rest, I'm going to really quickly show you guys what separates a sluggish game from a slow game. I love Starfield, but just because I love Starfield does not mean that I'm blind to its issues. Despite being an adventure game, in Starfield you can't travel between solar systems without opening a menu and fast traveling, which wouldn't be that bad if it worked like every other video game. In Starfield, if you want to fast travel to a really far away planet, you'll have to fast travel to probably 7 solar systems in between before you reach your destination because the fuel limit on your ship restricts you from traveling that far immediately, which would be fine if there was a working fuel system in Starfield. If Starfield was like No Man's Sky and you could just get in your ship and travel planet to planet, a refueling station would be immersive, fun, and make sense with the fast travel system. But because the game's space travel boils down to opening a menu and clicking a button, it's slow, not fun at all, and of course, sluggish. LA Noire took something like NPC interaction and turned it into a fun game mechanic. Starfield took fast travel, made it awful, and turned it into a game mechanic. Red Dead Redemption 2's fast travel isn't very accessible because if you want to go somewhere quick from any point on the map without using a train or stagecoach, you'll have to save up enough money for the map upgrade at camp. If you travel using the camp upgrade opposed to a train or stagecoach, a sequence happens where the game shows you footage of areas Arthur would have ventured adventured through had he not been fast traveling. Just so the adventure still feels like it happened. It's slow, sure, but it's also cinematic and fits with the general themes of Red Dead Redemption 2. One is slow but makes sense, and the other is slow and makes you question why Bethesda of all companies made a core feature in an adventure video game scrolling through menus. So no, slow pacing in video games isn't boring, but in my opinion, it's never been more important for the industry. Dr. Gloria Mark, a respected author and psychologist from California, reported that in the last 2 decades, the length of time that the average person will move from one screen to another, for example, a computer to a phone, has decreased from 2 minutes and 50 seconds to a measly 47 seconds. Because of the number of regular people who can't just lock into one thing at a time, a handful of creators behind a bunch of different sources of media have altered their work to reach the people who struggle with paying attention. And sure, there's certainly a number of video games that toss their original slow design out the window in favor of a faster approach like Fortnite, but a lot of the most critically acclaimed story games as of recently are very slow paced because it lets them stand out for 2 reasons. One, they give themselves time to breathe, so there's more subtleties to analyze in every moment. Instead of conflict being explained with a gunfight, it's explained with a look or an inflection in speech. Building proper tension is what makes a story game good, and video games as a whole have struggled for a long time with tension building because developers were constantly under pressure to keep the game exciting. While the original Silent Hill 2 is a fantastic game, I think the remake did a great job slowing the formula down, and it helped with making the uneasy moments more creepy because they were naturally spaced out. In the original Silent Hill 2, fighting enemies was a lot of spamming X and watching James dome incompetent monsters. Even though it technically padded out the playtime because you'd have to stop and fight them, it very similarly to Silent Hill 3 didn't feel too engaging. Silent Hill 2 Remake's combat is challenging and makes the player analyze the enemy's movements to strategize where to dodge and when to attack. You can even use certain combos like shooting an enemy in the knee and charge attacking to perform a quick takedown. In some games like Assassin's Creed or The Witcher 3, there will be a light that signals when an enemy is going to attack, but I love that in Silent Hill 2 Remake, it all relies on the player's observational skills, and in turn makes Silent Hill 2 Remake an even more intense horror title. One of my favorite memories with the game was when I was watching my girlfriend play through the Blue Creek's apartment chapter, and when she reached this part of the area, she probably stood in place like this for a minute before walking over and picking up the key item behind the shower curtain. This scare wasn't in the original Silent Hill 2, because the original Silent Hill 2 was much more scaled down and was a lot more bonking enemies on the head opposed to raw observational horror. Which in my opinion is where psychological horror shines brightest, almost like shining light into darkness. That's right everybody, it's not a Just One End video without talking about Red Dead Redemption 2. Like every mainline Rockstar title that comes out, Red Dead Redemption 2 brought something original to the open world genre, and that was its most controversial design choice, which was its pacing. Smashing down the A button while riding your horse will result in you crashing. Fast travel is not easily accessible, and the game repeatedly encourages and rewards exploration. Being a reckless terrorist will attract bounty hunters that interrupt potential missions nearby unless you pay off your bounty, kill them, or flee the area. Arthur needs to be taken care of, otherwise he will suck to control. Red Dead Redemption 2 is a game that cares about you as long as you care about it. Especially when it came out, it made most people playing it rethink their entire playstyle from previous open world games because it just doesn't work in Red Dead Redemption 2. The many punishments for careless behavior doesn't exist to be annoying. That wouldn't be fun. They exist because a serious thought out game world needs a player that will take it seriously. And when you start taking Red Dead seriously, you begin to appreciate the little things in the story, open world, soundtrack, controls, and the single player. I think while L.A. Noire was one of the main kickstarters to true slow pacing in video games, Red Dead Redemption 2, because of its god-tier success, marked the beginning to a new era in the video game industry. An era where developers began to see the value of slow pacing, and the many positive effects it has on an art piece if handled correctly. Including the most negative, depressing game of all time, The Last of Us 2. While the first Last of Us wasn't a happy game, it was a hopeful one, and each area had an ambient soundtrack backing it. In part 1, there was a clear end goal, and every step of the way had the player excited for what was to come next. I'm avoiding spoilers here, but The Last of Us 2 is, like I said earlier, a very bleak story game, especially the first half. Every so often, the player will enter these large spaces with no enemies giving any sense of life to the world. The post-apocalyptic setting of The Last of Us Part Part 2 is as convincing and depressing as the narrative. And being a semi-horror game makes the combat segments even more scary because of how spaced out they are. In the first game, as much as I love it, I remember feeling underwhelmed when halfway through the game, Tommy's dam gets attacked by raiders. In a world where almost everything has died, I thought the stakes became blurred when every 5 seconds there was a new combat segment with barely any time to breathe in between. I thought the sections of just exploring and finding notes to crack safes was fun and added more gameplay loops to the base experience. And hey, I like a good gunfight. Video games are fun. But there's a point where it gets excessive, and I think Grand Theft Auto 4 actually suffered from a similar issue in the late game. The invasion of Tommy's dam specifically felt strange because the fight happens right after a big stretch of liminal gameplay where the player walks down a few narrow paths, follows Tommy, and then gets into a condensed gunfight with barely any room to move around. Not bad, but just not as open as The Last of Us deserves, in my opinion. The Last of Us Part 2 completely fixes this issue by adding a bunch of puzzles in the world where most of them are completely optional and stand out from one another. As somebody that loves to take his sweet time, taking in the world and collecting as much side stuff as possible was such a fun experience, especially because it contrasted so well with the combat segments when they would eventually happen. I think that's another reason why I preferred the first half of The Last of Us 2 opposed to the second half. While the second half was awesome, and I'm not saying it's not, it was definitely more action and less exploration, and in a world as cool and beautiful as The Last of Us, I think it deserves to be explored and taken in like a game of golf opposed to downing it like a burrito. The beauty of enjoying slow video games is, well, 1, you get to play a video game, and 2, it's factually better for your brain's health. A fast-paced game that always has you on your toes, like Call of Duty, Valorant, Fortnite, or Grand Theft Auto 5, offers endless combat and competitive fun. But even though it's digital warfare, your body doesn't know the difference and still triggers your fight or flight response, which, if stimulated excessively, can cause a ton of health problems, from headaches and sleep deprivation to, in extreme cases, symptoms as bad as digestive problems or sexual dysfunction. Which is why statistically, Red Dead Redemption 2 players f so much more than every other type of gamer. While digital media in general isn't great for our brain's health, some digital media isn't nearly as bad as others, so when you let your mind wander and you sit down and play a slow video game instead of a fast-paced one, there are absolutely no losses and only benefits. Giving your mind time to breathe and make its own entertainment has a ton of mental health benefits like enhanced creativity, problem solving, and reduced anxiety. And once those slow-paced moments end and the action actually happens, you'll get a nicer feeling fight or flight response because it wasn't triggered excessively beforehand. It's about moderating your entertainment, so what you consume is balanced and maximizing your enjoyment. Give a man a fast-paced game, he'll be distracted for a few hours. Give a man a slow-paced game, he'll get a finer appreciation for the little things in between the action, and he'll appreciate the action a whole lot more.
That's why you gotta play Death Stranding, man.
Man, what the f? Get out of here, Death Stranding fan. Why would I want to play a walking simulator?
Why wouldn't you want to play a walking simulator?
Alright, I'm convinced. Death Stranding is one of those games that at launch was hated by critics and the general gaming community alike. So that raises a few questions. Was Death Stranding broken? No, Death Stranding was not broken. At launch it worked exactly as the developers intended. Was Death Stranding advertised as something it wasn't? No, Death Stranding was advertised as a mysterious slow burn Kojima game. So yeah, Death Stranding was another victim of hate because the genre just wasn't for the critics playing it. MOBAs have a massive community, but I get bored as hell playing them. Does that make them bad games? No. So yeah, I'm not going to review Dota 2 and act like I should be trusted with an educated opinion. Death Stranding is like nothing I have played in my entire life. Like LA Noire making NPC interaction fun, Death Stranding makes walking fun. Because the entire game you're playing as a delivery man trying to get as many packages done as possible in one go without damaging them, so you're constantly living a repeated cycle of joy. Death Stranding is 3 major things. 1, it's a huge left turn in the open world genre. Making the main game mechanic walking and keeping Norman Reedus, I mean Sam, balanced while traversing different terrain is simple but enjoyable, especially with how satisfying it feels when you take it slow and make it past a really difficult section. The stealth in Death Stranding stands out because you don't want your cargo damaged, so taking down mules also gives you that same dopamine boost out of sheer self-satisfaction. And 3, the story is so good. The world is so good. Some games games are slow because they want to be. Death Stranding is slow because it deserves to be. The universe that Hideo Kojima and everyone else on his team crafted is so big and full of lore that playing through the game and learning more about it as you progress is rewarding in itself. It's not for everybody, absolutely, but it's nowhere near a bad video game. Like how Arthur taking a can of beans out of his satchel and consuming it every time the player wants to eat a can of beans isn't bad game design. It's just a non-traditional development approach that makes the world more immersive. There has been an obvious rise in slow-paced video games because modern hardware has reached a point where developers can double down on immersion. And this isn't something that's going to stop anytime soon. Grand Theft Auto 6 is the most anticipated game of all time, no doubt, and with all of the new features Rockstar is cramming into this title, we already know the direction this game is headed. Tell me how players are going to be able to speed from one side of the map to the other in 5 seconds like GTA 5 when NPC traffic is this dense. Tell me why there's an NPC filling his car up with gas in the first trailer. In the second trailer, there were shots from what I can only assume to be missions where the main characters are pulling off stunts like jumping from a bike onto a cargo truck, shooting grenades at pursuing officers, and climbing out of a window to escape. Red Dead Redemption 2's climactic moments hit so much harder because of the way Rockstar balanced their missions, and I really hope, but also kind of expect, Rockstar will do the same thing with GTA 6, making it as a game generally slower paced by limiting how much power the player has. So yeah, slow games, what do you guys think? Do you think the rise in slow-paced game design is a good thing for the industry or a bad thing for the industry? Let me know in the comments below and I'll check them out as soon as I possibly can. As always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and make sure to have a good one. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video, and make sure to have a good one.